in the new edition of my sports nutrition guidebook, I talk about how people think on the rest day they shouldn't eat as much, but they can be twice as hungry. One, because they've got time to eat and thinking about food, but also the muscles take time to refuel. It can take up to 24, 48 hours to completely recover if your muscles are depleted.
Hello and welcome to Wise Nutrition Podcast, the podcast that brings you conversations about nutritional, health, mindset, and training topics. I'm your host, a certified nutrition coach, Daniel Weiss. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the podcast, and today I'm talking with Nancy Clark about her new sports nutrition guidebook. It's 6th edition already. We will be talking about what's new in her guidebook, specifically in relation to carbohydrates, carbohydrate recommendations, the fear of carbohydrates, recovery, and disordered eating. The show notes are gonna be, as always, linked in the episode description. If you like the podcast and you haven't done so already, please consider leaving a rating and a review online. And similarly, if you could share news about this podcast, I will be really glad and thankful. I mean, it would be great. And thank you for all of you who continue to do that. And without further ado, here is Nancy Clark. Okay, so hello and welcome, Nancy. Thank you for finding time to join us. Actually, this is the second time, and we have some big news or great news, and it is your new guideline, guidebook for exercisers and for sports nutrition. And I mean, I really love that book, so I'm really happy to have you here once again.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm pleased that my new book has come out and hopefully will help some of your audience.
Actually, your first release of the book, or first iteration, was like 1994?
That's correct. I think it was actually 1993, but it was a while ago. It was 6 editions ago. And it's always interesting to see how much has changed over the course of time.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that has changed, and we can see some things that's changed just a little bit, but then there are some things that change a lot from year to year. And also, I think what I see nowadays is like quite a big push for vegetarian and vegan athletes, or these recommendations. And I see that also you updated your guidebook to be in line with these new trends, let's say. And you have also provided some recipes, so that's very interesting. But let's start with something that is like more general, and that is like, let's discuss dietary guidelines for Americans, which is like from 2015 to 2022. And let's cover that, because you have it also updated in your book, and that is in terms of like sugar, saturated fat, and cholesterol. So can you tell us more about it?
Yes, I think a big change in the guidelines is trying to look more at the whole diet and not an individual food. So when it comes to sugar, the thinking in most athletes' mind is sugar is bad. But we want to look at the whole day, and the guidelines state that 10% of total calories for the day, can appropriately come from sugar if you choose to do so. So if you're an athlete who's eating, 2,500 calories a day, to have 250 calories of sugar is within, a reasonable balance. And many athletes get that. They drink sports drinks, they get gels, and maybe they have a few pieces of candy here or there. So it can easily be overshot, but yet for people who are eating, a balance of quality foods, a little bit of sugar isn't such a bad thing. It fuels the muscles. It's not evil. If you have something like chocolate milk for a recovery food, people say, oh, chocolate milk, it's got so much sugar in it. But that sugar fuels the muscles, and people look at the sugar, whereas I look at the protein, the calcium, the sodium, the potassium, all of the good nutrients that's in the milk with and the sugar makes it taste yummy.
And by the way, I think that sugar also, like you mentioned, we need to look at the context. So it's different context of athlete, different for the context of sedentary person, and what it does basically physiologically. So, for example, some athletes are very, like you mentioned, afraid of sugar. I was there myself, and I read one of your blog posts, and that was about what is the place. I think it was a white flour or white bread, something like this. And there you mentioned that you basically don't need to eat all whole foods, that you get pretty much enough nutrition, like micronutrients from about 1,500 calories of whole foods, and then you can pretty much supplement with some more processed foods, and that is kind of safe and sometimes can be even beneficial, especially like for athletes.
Yes, sometimes this clean eating movement gets a little bit carried away, and people think they need to eat this perfect diet with all natural foods. But there's a reason why some foods have had nutrients added to them, such as white flour. Yes, they take out certain nutrients, but they also add back B vitamins. They enrich it with iron. And iron, B vitamins are very important for active people. So the dietary guidelines state in the United States state that at least half the grains should be whole grain. But that's not a point of compromise, thinking, oh, we can never get Americans to eat all whole grain. It's because of the food fortification and enrichment that adds nutrients of concern back to a person's diet. Folic acid is enriched with foods fortified. And the reason being is that it helps to prevent birth defects. So if people have only all natural food with nothing added, it means that they get none of these added benefits from the nutrients that are added to the food. Now, that said, there are, ultra processed foods that are really questionable, and there are minimally processed foods that are enriched and fortified. So again, we have to look at the whole day. There's not a good food or a bad food. There's a balanced diet and an unbalanced diet.
Right, I really love that, how you stress that also in your book. And so maybe we can move on to something, the saturated fat. What's new about that in that topic?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, the dietary guidelines used to say eat less fat. And there is a whole campaign to knock out all types of fat. But now we know that saturated fat might be the bigger culprit, and that there are good fats that you definitely want to include. Things like nuts, pumpkin seeds, peanut butter, salmon, the oilier fish, olive oil. So the plant fats, the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated fats, are a very important part of a healthy diet. Avocado is back in style. So that the messages now are to limit the saturated fat, the hard fat that's in like greasy meats. And again, it's looking at the whole picture. And
also coconut oil.
Yeah, coconut oil is questionable. I think we need a lot more research on coconut oil, but to date, the research that I've seen suggests that it might have some good kinds of fatty acids in it, but it also has kinds that raise the bad cholesterol. So
Right. So there
moderation
is a.
always
I'm
works.
sorry.
Yeah, we always have to think moderation when it comes to intake of these hard fats.
Mhm. Yeah, so basically, saturated fat has been also linked to like cholesterol and heart disease. So I think we discussed this topic, and yeah, there are some
Yeah.
people who argue like, yeah, saturated fat is all bad. There are some people who say that it doesn't matter. Some people who say that cholesterol doesn't matter. So uh, recently, well, quite recently, a few months ago, we had this article about eggs, that they are great, and before there had been article that, eggs are terrible because of cholesterol. So it can be pretty hard to navigate for some people who are not really nutritionists or interested in these things, and to see all these kind of contradictory messages and articles online.
Precisely. A lot of the confusion comes because people will do a survey and they'll say, "Oh, people who eat eggs have higher cholesterol level." And what is it about people who eat eggs? Is the problem eggs, or is it bacon that comes with the eggs, or sausage that comes with the eggs? Is it the butter on the toast? Is it what comes with the eggs? Do people that eat eggs, maybe they're um, more sedentary than people that are on the
Mhm.
go and grabbing a piece of toast and peanut butter. Um, so the only really good studies are those that are, clinical trials with a control group, and the whole diet is controlled. Um, and so there's a lot of studies that just look at associations. And the same thing happened with coffee. It's like, oh, people that drink coffee have more heart disease. Coffee must be bad. But no, is it the cream in the coffee? Are coffee drinkers, what else do coffee drinkers eat? Are they less active? Do they have, we know that people who drink tea tend to have a healthier lifestyle than people that drink coffee. So it's there's a lot of noise in all of these scientific studies. So you really have to look at who did they study? Was there a control group? How good is this data? Because association does not mean that it was caused. So, by the eggs or the saturated fat. So stay tuned and we'll figure this out. Nutrition is a new science and it's always changing. So I'm open to listening to, better science that shows changes.
Yeah, I actually also saw some science that was speaking about cholesterol, and that the limits or the our needs also change over the age. So it's all similarly like to protein, that older people need more protein. That, for example, higher cholesterol could be protective in older population compared to younger population. So this is just something to think about.
Yeah, and you have to look at your, you know, how do you relate to that study? Are you an older
Mhm.
person? Well, we're all getting there, but, um, it, are you, most studies are not done on athletes. They're done on,
Right.
the general population. And this is particularly true with sugar. I mean, the body of an athlete just takes up sugar very, very easily. So when an athlete eats sugar, the muscles just absorb it. It gets transported into the muscles, and the muscles use it for fuel or to replace depleted glycogen stores. If you're an unfit person who's not active at all, a high intake of sugar is a completely different conversation because it can build up in the blood and contribute to prediabetes, or diabetes. So that fitness makes a huge difference in how a person's body handles a lot of these nutrients.
Definitely. And as far as I know, that basically physical activity is the most important when it comes, or the most important factor when it comes to insulin sensitivity.
Precisely. Yeah. I'd be the first to say that I think that exercise trumps nutrition in terms of
Yeah,
importance, but it all works together. There are many pieces of the puzzle that we need to pay attention to.
right. And I'm happy that we started speaking also about sugar. And I would uh, like to explore carbohydrates more, because recently we had also very popular ketogenic diet or high fat diet, specifically for health, also from the perspective of athletes. And as I was going through your book, this was like kind of interesting topic because many people speak about it, but also like we know that carbohydrates are very important for the athletes, and as we are training, especially if we train daily or even multiple times a day, we need to replenish our carbohydrate stores, because first for recovery, for health, and then also for performance. So this is something that people need to be reminded that it's not something to be afraid of.
So true. So many people, are afraid that carbohydrates are fattening, that they're bad for their health. And again, that word carbohydrate is very tainted. Um, so I prefer to talk about fruits and vegetables and grains.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that every major health organization tells us to eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains. So to eliminate them eliminates a lot of nutrients. But that said, when it comes to the keto diet, there's a lot of interesting research coming out on it. But I don't see it as a diet. I see it as a lifestyle. And
Mm-hmm.
a person really needs to be able to embrace having foods different from everybody else. If they're going to a
Right.
party, if it's a birthday party and you're not eating the birthday cake, how does that feel? How does it make other people feel? There's something very nice socially about being able to eat from the same pot. So again, it's a lifestyle. I'm not convinced that people can get better results from the keto diet than they can from eating a balanced, high quality conventional diet. But there's not a one food program that fits everybody. Some people do better with food rules, like no carbs. But the keto diet that many people are eating really isn't the keto diet. It's just a high protein, high fat diet that can be very satiating and helps people feel fed. And if you're not hungry, then it's easier to not eat as many cookies and sweets. And so it, it's a conversation. And with each of my clients, I listen to what their needs are and what they're looking for and how their lifestyle works. And it's very important to create a food plan that's sustainable. And the problem is there's a lot of diet backlash. So I've heard horror stories about people that go on the keto diet for 3 weeks, 3 months, and then they go, tired of this, give me a bagel, give me some pasta. And then they binge because they haven't had it for so long. It's been denied, it's been deprived, and it just creates a whole cycle of on a diet, off a diet, feeling guilty or feeling ashamed. And it's just, that's not a good way to live. So, want to be consistent keto for the rest of your life, that's one conversation. If it's sustainable for you, but there are many other ways to be healthy as well.
So when you think about it, specifically ketogenic diet as a lifestyle, so it seems like, from my perspective, lifestyle means to be something that is, like you mentioned, sustainable for like longer term or long term. So do you think that it is actually sustainable for long term?
I know of some people that have done it for several years and they're very happy. I know of other people that have done it for 3 days and were miserable. So it's your mindset if it works for you, but, um, it's just a challenge in particularly in social situations. I mean, the same thing goes for intermittent fasting. There's good research coming out saying how it can help with blood sugar levels, but in the context of how a person lives, what happens to family meals? What happens to social eating? What happens if you're hungry at a time when you're supposed to be fasting? Is it really dysregulating normal body signals? So it's looking at the whole picture, the whole lifestyle and sustainability. There are many, many ways to be healthy. And, I happen to like the conventional balanced diet approach in helping people to eat, you know, quality foods within the context of breakfast, lunches, dinners, you know, healthy snacks and fueling up, refueling, and enjoying high energy, in a way that's sustainable.
Right. So we started also mentioning one very important topic, and that is like eating disorders, as you were indirectly speaking about when it comes to social situations and putting restrictions of oneself, maybe because an athlete or exerciser believes that it will help them in some way or it is beneficial for them, and that can over time or to some degree influence their social life, their health, and their performance. And yeah, there, as far as I know, like there is no like straight line, like this is eating disorder, this is not eating disorder, and there is a lot of research going on currently on that topic. So maybe we should also mention this.
Yes, I mean, there's an outright eating disorder, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. There's disordered eating. And in the new edition of my sports nutrition guidebook, there's a new phrase that is talked about, which is called RED S, relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's people who exercise more and don't quite eat enough without really knowing it, and their body is deficient in energy. Among women, we see the results as being amenorrhea, loss of their menstrual period, because there's just not enough fuel for the body to support the exercise program as well as normal body functionings. Among men, it shows up in low testosterone and, fatigue, needless fatigue, um, and reduced performance, reduced bone health. So not everybody who undereats is anorexic or has an eating
Right.
disorder. I have clients who eat a lot of healthy foods. They eat a lot of dates and walnuts and almonds and whole grain breads. And when you're eating really quality, wholesome foods, oftentimes that fiber is very satiating and you just don't get hungry as often if you eat cookies and candy. Um, so that they think they're eating great, but they're just under eating and without even knowing it. So that's what relative energy deficiency in sport is, REDS.
Yes, so can we actually define this relative energy deficiency, what it means? Because as you mentioned that there are many people who eat like healthy, but they just eat uh, fewer calories than they could use or would be beneficial for them. So this is specifically for sports and for athletes.
Correct. I mean, someone can have a big bowl of oatmeal with peanut butter and raisins in it and be stuffed, but it might not be enough calories for because they just went for a 10-mile run, and they need 1,000 calories, but they're eating only 500. but yet their body might not feel, the body can feel satiated. And over time, this takes its toll. Generally, they lose weight, but then they get down to their fighting weight, and the body starts to hibernate. They don't lose any more body fat, but the body starts to conserve energy. And it conserves energy. They feel cold a lot, tired, droopy, moody, easily irritated, and may not recover as well, perform as well. And, sometimes this is wrapped up in an eating disorder, and sometimes it's just wrapped up in oblivion. They don't know.
Right, because I was recently listening to another podcast and they were speaking specifically about this relative energy deficiency. And what they mentioned were, like you already said, athletes who are not fueling for their workout is like they are risking health issues, under-recovering, lowered performance, lower testosterone, loss of period, lowered bone density, hair loss. They also mentioned not being able to recover from the perspective of having like onset muscle soreness for several days, like 2-3 days instead of, let's say, 1 day. So this comes down to under recovering. And they mentioned one interesting thing, like they put specific numbers that for general population it's about like the borderline is about 30 calories per kilogram of body weight, and for athletes it's about 45 calories per body weight. If you go below that, then you are pretty much underfueling yourself and in a relative energy deficiency.
Correct. That there have been studies to show, where the boundaries tend to be between fueling well for performance and under eating. Not many people really know exactly how many calories they're consuming, but certainly if they're tracking it, they can, take their weight in kilograms and divide it into how many calories they're consuming and see if they're getting close to 45 calories per kilogram.
Right. And this brings me to an interesting idea that's like many athletes don't eat as much when they actually have their training days, but maybe on their off days, when they don't train, they tend to be much hungrier for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I think you also mentioned in the book, and that is like that they are afraid to eat more or whatever, but your body is in a recovery, so it needs all this energy to repair, and maybe it's just, that is something not to be afraid of. That's one point, and that, you will not just gain weight. Because you are an athlete, you have been running in deficit for a longer time during your training period.
Precisely. When it comes to recovery, in the new edition of my Sports Nutrition Guidebook, I talk about how people think on the rest day they shouldn't eat as much, but they can be twice as hungry. One, because they've got time to eat and thinking about food, but also the muscles take time to refuel. It can take up to 24, 48 hours to completely recover if your muscles are depleted. So after a marathon, people aren't exercising, but they can be hungrier. I have, many clients that talk about, I was hungry for 3 or 4 days after the marathon. And the body does an amazing job of requesting fuel. If it needs fuel, you will feel hungry. So feeling hunger doesn't mean, oh no, I'm going to eat and get fat. Feeling hunger means, I'm refueling my depleted glycogen stores and I'm going to perform better at my next workout. So On a rest day, if you take one day off, you'll probably feel just as hungry, almost as hungry. If you take 2 days off, you might also feel hunger. If you take 3 days off in a row, by the third day, your appetite just goes, ugh, I don't even feel like eating. And it's just an amazing process to watch. Now, the scary part is for each 1 pound, 1 ounce of glycogen that gets stored in the muscles, people store about 3 ounces of water. And so the scale goes up. So here, the person taking a rest day is still eating as much. They weigh themselves afterwards. The scale goes 4 pounds, and they go, oh, I can't even take a day off without getting fat. And they don't realize that the weight gain is water weight. So the solution is pay attention to how you feel on your workout the day after a rest day. It's like, wow, I feel great. And that's what we're looking at, the benefits. The bad things happen when you exercise, and the good things happen when you rest. And a good thing is refueling the muscles, and that takes food.
Very well said. I love it. So, you also mentioned one important topic in the book, which I found interesting, and that was regarding carbohydrate loading. There are a lot of things written about it, and some of the things you mentioned is do not fat load, do not carb load on fruit, white bread, and do not load on beer. So can we speak more about this?
Well, don't carbo load on too much fruit, because then you might end up with diarrhea from the high fiber content. Don't carbo load on too much white bread, because you might get constipated. And if you carbo load on beer, you're more likely to get loaded than carbo loaded. Beer actually is a pretty poor source of carbohydrates. So the thing about carbo loading is really you want to change your exercise more so than your diet, because every day you're fueling up and refueling, fueling up, refueling. And the big difference between a marathon or a long distance event is that, the week or so beforehand, you want to taper off your exercise. If you keep your eating the same, of fueling up, with lots of grains and fruits and vegetables, essentially, if you're not burning off all those calories, they go into carbo loading. But carbo loading doesn't mean stuffing yourself with pasta. It means tapering off your exercise, keeping your eating the same with your tried and true foods that you're familiar with, and really resting the muscles to allow them the time to become fully loaded with glycogen.
Right, and you also described several strategies, which I think we will not go into it because really there are several, and people can find it in your book, and there are a lot of interesting topics also. But one more important thing is, I think, to mention is FODMAPs. So maybe in context of pre-exercise nutrition or pre-workouts, and I think they can have a negative impact on performance for some people.
Yes, FODMAPs, for people that don't know what they are, it stands for fermentable, which means gas producing. Fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And what that translates into, those are all different kinds of carbohydrates that the body might have trouble digesting. For example, some people can't digest lactose, milk sugar. And so if they have lactose-free milk, then they're okay. But there are also people that can't digest very comfortably apples or onions or garlic. And there is a whole list of foods that are high in these fermentable carbohydrates. And for runners, they found that if you have intestinal problems, if you pay attention to what you eat, the day before or a few days before an important event or a long training run or whatever, that you can reduce the risk of intestinal distress. And it can be as simple as, not having as much onion and garlic in your pasta sauce. So in my sports nutrition guidebook, I talk a little bit about FODMAPs, and someone could Google information. Kate Scarlatta, Scarlata, Kate Scarlatta is a dietitian who's really done a lot of work with FODMAPs, and she has all sorts of lists of foods that are high in them and low in them. So runners with intestinal problems certainly want to explore the possibility of a lower FODMAP intake that might resolve their intestinal problems.
So let's mention just for a second, like what could be the problems with the gut if I have like high FODMAP meal before maybe competition, before running, let's say even several hours before, but it is not digested efficiently.
Yeah, what you would find is that you might feel really bloated, and you might have trouble with diarrhea, fecal urgency, and or cramping, so that
You will be faster in the finish.
yeah. So if you want to have an enjoyable exercise experience, it's much easier to enjoy it when you're not dealing with, stomach cramping and intestinal distress.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you to wrap it up. Like, I really loved your book, and there are a lot of things that I love. I haven't had time to finish it all, unfortunately, because it's so full of content. And I just started reading one chapter, and I was reading like everything. Sometimes when I read a book, I just pick some specific information, but I really love how detailed it is, yet it is easy to comprehend and put into practice, because you also support it with like recipes, some inspiration. There are some stories of the athletes, so from the practical perspective or from the real life situations. And I really love that the book has this kind of inviting and warm vibe. So I really appreciate for you writing it and sharing this information in a way that you do.
Well, thank you very much. I try very hard to bring, the personal stories into it. Well, not personal to me, but looking at the struggles that my clients have, and how by working with a sports dietitian, that they're able to resolve those issues and to feel a lot more peaceful about food and resolve their confusion. There's just so much confusion today about what do I eat, and what's the best sports diet, and what's good and what's bad, what should I stay away from. So in the 6th edition of my sports nutrition guidebook, I really try hard to address that confusion so that the readers can find peace with food and enjoy fueling your body.
Yeah, I think you managed to do that. So what is actually the take-home message for anybody who is listening?
The take-home message is that the E in eating is for enjoyment. The E in exercise should also be for enjoyment. And you can enjoy fueling your body with a variety of, quality foods that are yummy and healthy, and feel good about what you're putting into your body, and exercise well. It takes a little bit of planning, but it's worth, there's a benefit. People make nutrition changes when the benefit is higher than the cost. So the cost is you have to grocery shop, you need to plan ahead, maybe you do a little bit of cooking or maybe not. I've got a lot of cook-free ideas in my book. But just be responsible, and you'll find that the benefits are worth the costs. And so, you want to take care of your body, because this is your your home. And I think it was a very famous baseball player, Mickey Mantle, who said, "Oh, if only I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of my body." It's like, people these days are living to ripe old ages, and we want to make sure that our body stays healthy the whole journey.
Right. It's different to live and to thrive. So where can actually people get this ebook? Is it like also it is in print only, or is it can they get also in a ebook format?
From the publisher, Human Kinetics, they can get it. They can buy the book, and they have availability in Europe as well as in the United States and Canada. Amazon.com carries it. If you're ordering it from, I have it on my website, but the postage is, if you're in, Europe and ordering it from me on my website, the postage is phenomenal. So it's better to find it more locally. So just Google Nancy Clark's Sports Nutrition Guidebook, 6th edition, and you can get it from your local bookstore, perhaps, if not the library, or ask the library to order it. And it should be readily available because it's been a popular book. There's a lot of copies have been sold, and so I think it's just managing to find the place that's convenient for wherever you live.
I think it will be also translated soon to several different languages because it's so popular.
Yes, my other books have all been translated into, Portuguese and Spanish and Czechoslovakian and Japanese and German and Italian and lots of different languages. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Nancy, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your time that you spent with us today. And yeah, for anybody who wants to order the book, I will leave the links below. And yeah, looking forward to speak with you maybe sometime in future.
Well, this has been my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Goodbye.